The gate slams shut behind me, before I even understand what is happening. 1 second I am walking through a stone archway with a folder of treaty documents under my arm, and the next second, metal groans, chains pull tight, and the opening I just walked through disappears behind a wall of dark plating. I turn around fast. My heart is already pounding. The folder slips from my hand and papers scatter across the floor. "Wait," I say, to no one in particular. "Wait, there must be a mistake." A voice answers from somewhere above me, calm and sharp at the same time. "There is no mistake, Ethan Cole. You are standing inside the outer ring of the Vexthari Academy. The gate only opens one way during intake hours. You have already been counted." I look up. Cameras. Dozens of them, mounted along stone pillars that look ancient but hum with quiet power. This place was built to look like a fortress from a story, but everything underneath is far more advanced than it appears. "Counted for what?" I ask. "For training," the voice says. "Congratulations, cadet. You are now enrolled." I came here as a diplomat. My government sent me to observe, to build the first real bridge between humanity and the Vexthari, a species so private about their military traditions that outsiders were never permitted near this academy before. I was supposed to watch from a guest platform, take notes, shake hands, and go home in 3 weeks with enough information to write a report that would make careers, including my own. Instead, I am standing in a courtyard of gray stone, alone, while my papers blow across the ground like they don't matter anymore. And apparently, they don't. Footsteps echo from a corridor to my left, measured, unhurried, deliberate. A woman steps into the courtyard, tall, with pale gray skin, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her uniform is dark red, fitted close, marked with symbols I don't recognize. She studies me the way someone studies a problem that needs to be solved quickly, and without much sentiment. "You are the human," she says. "It is not a question." Ethan Cole. I'm a cultural liaison from the Terran Diplomatic Office. I was told I'd be observing your training programs from the visitors gallery, not this, she finishes for me. "I am Commandant Selvara. I run this academy, and I am telling you, Ethan Cole, that your visitors gallery does not exist anymore. It was removed 11 years ago after a security incident. No one told your office to update their information, because no one expected your office to send anyone at all." "Then send me back out," I say, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'll wait for the next diplomatic window." Selvara tilts her head slightly, and for a moment I think she might actually agree. Then she says something that changes everything. "You misunderstand our laws, not our intentions. Any being who passes beyond the outer gate during an intake cycle is bound by the Academy Charter. It does not matter if you meant to enter as a guest. The moment your foot crossed the threshold, you became a candidate. The gate does not open again for 24 hours. After that, you are either a cadet of this academy, or you are gone, and not gently." "Gone how?" "Removed," she says, publicly. "As a failure. Your treaty office will receive a full report explaining that the first human sent to us could not complete a single day of basic intake and had to be physically escorted out. I imagine that will look interesting in your official records." I stand there for a moment, trying to process what she's telling me. This is not a misunderstanding I can argue my way out of. This is not a paperwork error a strongly worded letter will fix. Somewhere in the fine print of a treaty I barely skimmed before boarding my transport, there is probably a clause about academy admission that nobody on our side bothered to translate carefully. "What happens if I stay?" I ask. "Then you train," Selvara says simply. "Like every other cadet who enters this gate. You will eat what they eat, sleep where they sleep, and be measured against the same standards. There is no separate track for diplomats. There is no separate track for humans. There is no separate track for anyone. This is an all-female academy," I say, because it feels important to say out loud, as if saying it will somehow change the physics of the situation. "I don't think I fit the profile you're training for." For the first time, something flickers across Selvara's face that might almost be amusement. "You noticed. Good. Perhaps you are not entirely useless as an observer after all. Yes, this academy has trained only Vexthari women for over 300 years. You will be the first exception in its history. Some of my instructors think that is a disaster waiting to happen. Some think it is an opportunity. I have not decided which of them is correct. And what do you think? I think, she says, stepping closer, that you have less than 24 hours to decide if you want to find out. I look past her, down the corridor she came from. I can hear something now that I hadn't noticed before. A distant rhythm of footsteps, dozens of them, moving in unison somewhere deep in the building. Training has already started without me. Cadets are already inside, already working, already proving themselves while I stand here arguing about gates and charters. If I refuse, I say slowly, what happens to the treaty, to the relationship between our people? Selvara's expression hardens slightly. That is not my department. I train soldiers, not diplomats. But I imagine your office will not be thrilled to learn that the first human envoy to the Vexthari Academy ran from an open door, rather than walk through the rest of it. That word lands harder than I expect. Ran. I have spent my entire career trying to prove that humans belong in these rooms, at these tables, inside these histories, that other species have been writing for centuries without us. I did not travel across the stars, endure the transport sickness, memorize 300 pages of cultural protocol, and walk through that gate just to become the diplomat who turned around at the first sign of difficulty. But I also know what I am. I am not a soldier. I have never been trained to fight, and everything I have heard about the Vexthari suggests they could break me in half without much effort. Walking further into this academy is not caution, it's a decision that could genuinely put my safety and my future at risk. How many cadets fail, I ask, on a normal cycle? Nearly a third. Selvara answers without hesitation, as if she respects the question enough to give it an honest number. Most who fail are Vexthari. Most who fail are strong, fast, and skilled beyond anything your species has produced. If you are asking whether you have a realistic chance of completing this training, the honest answer is that the odds are not in your favor. Then why let me try at all? Why not just send me out now and save everyone the trouble? Selvara studies me for a long moment before answering. Because the charter does not care about odds. It cares about the threshold you crossed. And because, she adds, quieter now, I am curious what a human will do when the odds are not in his favor. Your species has a reputation for doing strange things under pressure. I would like to see if the reputation is earned. Somewhere behind her, a bell rings, low and resonant, echoing off the stone walls. She glances toward the sound, then back to me. That is the first assembly signal. Cadets who intend to stay, report to the training yard within 10 minutes. Cadets who intend to leave may wait here for the gate to reopen at dawn, and be escorted out in shame in front of the entire incoming class. You make it sound like there's only one real choice. There is only one choice that does not end your career before it begins, she says. But it is still your choice, Ethan Cole. I will not make it for you. She turns, and begins walking back down the corridor, her footsteps unhurried, confident, as if she already knows what I will decide, and is simply giving me the courtesy of arriving at it myself. I stand alone in the courtyard for a moment, papers scattered around my feet, the folder I brought, suddenly feeling completely useless. Everything I prepared for this mission assumed I would be watching from a distance, taking careful notes, staying safe behind glass, while other people did the difficult work of proving themselves. I bend down and gather the papers anyway, not because I need them, but because my hands need something to do while my mind catches up to the situation. As I straighten up, I look at the corridor Selvara disappeared into, and beyond it, the sound of that unified marching rhythm, dozens of feet moving as one, cadets already committed to a path I have not yet chosen. I think about the report I would have to write if I walk away now. I think about the years of work my department put into securing even this small opening with the Vexthari, a species that has kept humanity at careful arm's length since first contact. I think about what it would mean, both for me and for everyone who comes after me, if the story becomes that the first human offered a seat at this table stood up and left before dinner was even served. And underneath all of that careful, practical reasoning, there is something simpler and more stubborn. A part of me that does not like being told I don't belong somewhere, especially not by a closing gate and a fine print clause I never got the chance to read. I look down at my hands. They are shaking slightly, which I choose to ignore. 10 minutes, she said. I glance at the corridor, then at the sealed gate behind me, dark metal fused seamlessly into the stone, as if it was never an opening at all. There is no way out that door until morning, and morning brings its own kind of ending if I choose to wait for it. I start walking toward the sound of marching feet. The corridor is longer than it looked from the courtyard, lit by strips of pale light set into the ceiling, the walls lined with old banners in a language I cannot read yet, though I recognize enough of the symbols to guess they represent classes of cadets who trained here long before I arrived. My footsteps sound strange and small against the stone, nothing like the confident rhythm ahead of me. As I get closer, the corridor opens into a wide yard, and I stop at the threshold, staring. Hundreds of cadets stand in perfect formation across the open ground, rows upon rows of Vexthari women in matching gray training uniforms. Every one of them taller than me. Every one of them standing with a kind of stillness that feels less like discipline and more like coiled readiness. Their eyes are already on me. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in a slow ripple, head after head turning slightly, to register the strange new shape standing at the edge of their world. At the front of the formation, Selvara stands with her hands behind her back, watching me, with an expression I cannot quite read. Somewhere in that crowd, though I don't know it yet, is a cadet named Niara, who will spend the next several weeks convinced that I am the worst decision this academy has ever made. I do not know any of their names yet. I do not know their ranks, their rivalries, or the unspoken rules that govern every corner of this place. All I know is that I am standing at the edge of a formation of soldiers who have trained their entire lives for a path I am about to attempt with no training at all, and that somewhere behind me, a gate has already sealed shut on the version of my life where I simply watched from a distance. Selvara's voice cuts across the yard, carrying easily over the silence. Cadets, this is Ethan Cole. He has chosen to remain. A murmur moves through the ranks, not loud, but unmistakable. Hundreds of trained soldiers, processing the same strange fact I am still processing myself. I am here, I am staying, and whatever happens next, there is no version of this story where I simply go home unchanged. I straighten my shoulders, take a breath, and step into the yard. The training ground at dawn is colder than anything I prepared for, and my legs are already shaking before the first drill even begins. We stand in rows on a wide field ringed by low stone walls, mist still clinging to the grass, and an instructor named Vexira paces in front of us with a datapad in one hand. She is shorter than most of the other Vexthari I have seen so far, but something about the way she moves tells me she is more dangerous than her height would suggest. Sprint course, she announces, without any warmth in her voice. 6 laps around the outer wall. Anyone who finishes outside the marked time will repeat the course immediately. There is no partial credit for effort here. Around me, cadets shift into ready positions, backs straight, breathing controlled, like this is a formality, rather than a genuine physical trial. I glance at the wall Vexira mentioned. It looks impossibly far away. A whistle cuts through the cold air, and the field explodes into motion. I have run before. I used to jog sometimes, back home, along quiet paths near my apartment, mostly to clear my head after long days of writing reports nobody read carefully. That kind of running does not prepare a person for this. Within the first 100 meters, cadets are already pulling ahead of me in smooth, powerful strides, their bodies built for exactly this kind of sustained effort. My chest burns. My legs feel heavier with every step. By the time I finish the first lap, most of the formation has already vanished around the far side of the wall. I keep going anyway. By the 3rd lap, I am alone, completely alone, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears, the field empty, except for scattered instructors watching with unreadable expressions. Somewhere ahead, faint and distant, I can hear the rest of the class finishing, their voices carrying back across the grass in bursts of conversation that has nothing to do with me. I finish the 6th lap so far outside the marked time that Vexira doesn't even bother reading the number off her datapad. She simply looks at me, then gestures toward the starting line. Again, she says. My whole body wants to argue. Instead, I nod, because arguing costs energy I don't have, and I walk back to the starting line while cadets who have already finished stretch and rehydrate nearby, watching me with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to open disbelief. One of them, a cadet with sharp features and dark eyes that seem to catalog everything they land on, watches me longer than the others. Later I will learn her name is Niara, and that she has already decided, before I have said a single word to her, that I am a liability who will get someone hurt before this cycle ends. I run the course again. I finish it slower than the first time, which should be impossible, but exhaustion has a way of rewriting the rules of what a body can do. Vexira looks at the number, then at me, and simply writes something on her datapad without comment. I don't know if that silence is worse than being told to run it a third time. I suspect it might be. The rest of the morning does not improve. Combat drills follow the sprint course, and I am paired against a cadet who could probably lift me over her head without much strain. The exercise is meant to teach basic defensive positioning, nothing aggressive, nothing designed to cause harm, simply footwork and balance against a moving opponent. I still end up on the ground 4 times in the first 2 minutes, the wind knocked out of me, staring up at a gray morning sky, while my partner waits patiently for me to get back up. "You are not using your weight correctly," she says, not unkindly, extending a hand to help me stand. "You keep trying to match my strength instead of redirecting it. Is there a version of this where I don't get thrown around like a training dummy?" I ask, only half joking, taking her hand and pulling myself upright. "Eventually," she says, "if you survive long enough to learn." Her name, I later learn, is Talia, and she will turn out to be one of the few cadets willing to speak to me honestly, rather than treating me like a curiosity or a problem to be managed. But on this first morning, all I know is that she is stronger than me, faster than me, and infinitely more comfortable inside her own body than I am inside mine. By midday, I have failed the obstacle course twice, been thrown to the ground more times than I can count, and finished dead last in every timed exercise the instructors have run. My hands are scraped raw from the climbing wall. My legs feel like they belong to someone else, someone much older and much more tired than I actually am. I sit alone at the edge of the field during the brief meal break, forcing down whatever protein ration the academy provides, and I do not have the energy to feel embarrassed anymore. Embarrassment requires a kind of energy I simply don't have left. Niara approaches while I am eating, flanked by 2 other cadets I don't recognize yet. She stops a few feet away and crosses her arms, studying me the way someone studies a broken piece of equipment they're trying to decide whether to fix or discard. "You should leave," she says, without any preamble. "Tonight, before the injury reports start piling up, you are going to get hurt. Or worse, you are going to get one of us hurt, trying to compensate for what you lack." "I appreciate the concern," I say, though I mostly don't, but I'm staying. "This is not stubbornness worth admiring," she says. "This is a body that was not built for what this academy demands. You saw the sprint course. You saw the drills. You have no advantage here, none, and pretending otherwise wastes everyone's time, including your own." "Maybe," I say. "Or maybe I just haven't found what I'm good at yet." She studies me for a long moment, and something in her expression suggests she has heard this kind of empty confidence before, from cadets who washed out within the first week and were never spoken of again. There is a difference between determination and delusion, Ethan Cole. I hope, for your sake, you learn to tell them apart before this academy teaches you the difference the hard way. She walks away before I can respond, her 2 companions following close behind, and I am left sitting alone with my half-finished ration and the uncomfortable feeling that she might be completely right about me. The afternoon session is worse than the morning. We move to a training hall filled with obstacles designed to test reaction speed, quick decision-making under pressure, and the ability to recover instantly from mistakes. I fail nearly every station. My reflexes simply too slow to match cadets who have been training their entire lives for exactly this kind of pressure. By the time the session ends, the instructors are no longer bothering to hide their skepticism, and even Talia, who has been kind to me all day, has started to look concerned rather than encouraging. That evening, alone in the small quarters assigned to me, a narrow room with a single cot and a window looking out over the darkened training field, I finally let myself feel the full weight of the day. My body aches in places I didn't know could ache. My scraped hands sting when I flex my fingers. Every part of me is screaming that Niara was right, that this was a mistake born from pride rather than good judgment, that I should request an early exit before the gate seals for the night and locks me into another day of humiliation. Instead, I sit on the edge of the cot, and think about something my grandfather used to say, back when I was young enough to complain about difficult things, without understanding what difficulty actually meant. He used to say that strength comes in more shapes than the ones you can measure with a stopwatch. At the time, I thought it was the kind of thing adults say to make children feel better about losing. Tonight, exhausted and aching, in a room built for someone twice my size, I find myself wondering if there was more truth in that statement than I ever gave him credit for. I don't have the speed the Vextari have. I don't have the strength, the reflexes, or the years of training that let cadets like Niara move through obstacle courses like the ground itself is cooperating with them. But I notice something, lying there in the dark, replaying the day's failures in my mind. Every drill today tested individual performance. Every exercise measured a single body against a single standard, speed against speed, strength against strength, reflex against reflex. Nothing today tested whether a cadet could think differently than the cadet next to her. Nothing tested whether someone could solve a problem the instructors themselves hadn't anticipated. It isn't much. It isn't a plan, not yet. But it's the first thought all day that doesn't feel like defeat. The next morning begins the same way the first one did, with cold mist across the field, and Vexira pacing in front of the formation with her data pad. But this time, when the sprint course starts, I don't try to match the pace of the cadets around me. I settle into something slower, something sustainable, pacing myself the way my grandfather once told me marathon runners do, saving something for the final stretch instead of burning everything in the first desperate push. I still finish last, but I finish only slightly outside the marked time this time, not by the enormous margin of the day before, and Vexira's eyes linger on me for a moment longer than they did yesterday, as if she's recalculating something in her assessment of what I might become. During combat drills, I stop trying to match Talia's strength and start paying closer attention to the advice she gave me the day before, letting her weight carry past me instead of meeting it head-on. I still end up on the ground more often than not, but not every time now. And once, just once, I manage to redirect her momentum enough that she stumbles slightly before catching herself. "Better," she says, and there is real approval in her voice this time, not just polite encouragement. Nyara watches this exchange from across the field, her expression unreadable, but I notice her eyes stay on me longer than they need to. She does not approach me again that day, does not repeat her warning from the afternoon before, but something in the way she watches me now feels different, less certain than it was, as if the easy conclusion she reached about me yesterday is starting to feel less easy today. I am still the slowest cadet in the yard. I am still the weakest in every drill that measures raw physical strength, but something has shifted, quietly, almost invisibly, somewhere in the space between yesterday's total collapse and today's small, stubborn improvement. I am not winning. I am barely surviving, but I am still here, still moving, still finding some way to answer each drill the instructors throw at me, even when the answer is imperfect and slow, and costs me more than it seems to cost anyone else. That evening, as I walk back toward my quarters, aching in all the same places as the night before but somehow feeling less defeated by the ache, Talia falls into step beside me. "You are not fast," she says, without any cruelty in her voice, simply stating a fact the way the Vextari seem to prefer stating things. "You are not strong, but you did not stop today, even when stopping would have been reasonable. Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation," she says. "Whether it becomes a compliment depends on what you do with the days that come after this one." I think about that as I lie in my narrow cot that night, staring up at the dark ceiling, listening to the distant sound of wind moving across the training field outside my window. I do not know yet what those coming days will demand of me. I do not know that within the week, a war games exercise will force every cadet in this academy, myself included, to question everything they think they understand about how a fight can be won. I do not know that Niara, who watches me now with suspicion bordering on dismissal, will eventually stand beside me when it matters most. All I know, lying there with scraped hands and aching legs, and a body that feels entirely unsuited for the life I have somehow chosen to attempt, is that I am still here. And for tonight, against every reasonable expectation the day began with, that feels like enough. The announcement comes during morning formation, and the entire yard goes still the moment Selvara says the words "War Games exercise." "Third-year cadets against first years," she says, her voice carrying easily across the silent field. A full simulation, conducted in the Eastern Forest, using standard non-lethal equipment. The objective is simple. Capture the flag marker from the opposing base, and return it to your own, before the time limit expires. The third years have won this exercise for the last 6 cycles without exception. I do not expect this cycle to be different. Around me, I hear quiet murmurs of resignation from the other first years, cadets, who already seem to accept the outcome before the exercise has even begun. It strikes me as strange, this quiet acceptance of defeat from women who fought so hard against me in every physical drill this week. Niara, standing a few rows ahead of me, doesn't murmur anything at all. She simply stares straight ahead, jaw tight, the posture of someone who hates losing but has learned to expect it in this particular contest. Why do the third years always win? I ask Talia quietly, as the formation breaks and cadets begin moving toward the equipment stations. Experience, she says. They know the terrain better, they have more advanced tactics, and they fight the way we are taught to fight. Direct engagement, disciplined formations, honorable positioning. We fight the same way, only with less skill, because we have not yet mastered it. Something about that phrase catches in my mind. The same way, only with less skill. I think about the training grounds this week, the drills, the combat exercises, every single lesson built around the idea that there is one correct way to move through a fight, and that mastery simply means executing that one correct way, with greater speed and precision than your opponent. What if we didn't fight the same way? I ask. Talia glances at me, curious. What do you mean? I don't answer right away, because the thought is still forming, still rough around the edges, but something about it feels important enough to hold on to, rather than let slip away in the rush toward the equipment stations. An hour later, our squad gathers in a briefing room, 12 first-year cadets assigned to work together for the exercise, myself included. Niara is our squad leader, chosen for her exceptional scores in the physical trials, and she stands at the front of the room with a data pad, showing the forest terrain, already outlining a plan that sounds exactly like every strategy Talia described. We move as a unified formation, Niara says, tracing a path across the projected map. Direct route toward their flag position, fast and disciplined. If we move quickly enough, we might reach the flag before their defenses fully mobilize. That's exactly what they'll expect, I say, before I can stop myself. The room goes quiet. Niara turns to look at me, her expression somewhere between annoyance and genuine surprise that I spoke at all during a tactical briefing. And you have a better idea, she says. It isn't really a question. I hesitate, aware that every cadet in the room is now watching me, aware that I have no formal military training, no tactical education, nothing to justify speaking up except a hunch, born from watching how confidently everyone here talks about the same predictable approach. The third years have won 6 cycles in a row using the same basic strategy, I say slowly. Direct formations, disciplined engagement, honorable positioning. If every squad that faces them fights the same way, every year, then they've built their entire defense around expecting exactly that. What if we didn't give them what they expect? What would you suggest instead? Niara asks, arms crossed, clearly skeptical, but not immediately dismissing the question. Deception, I say. Misdirection. Split the squad. Send a small group forward, loud and visible, moving exactly the way they expect a first-year squad to move. Let their defenses focus entirely on that group. Meanwhile, the rest of us move quietly through terrain nobody would expect a direct assault to use, circle around, and approach the flag from a direction their defense isn't watching. Silence fills the room. A cadet near the back, someone I don't know well yet, speaks up with clear disapproval in her voice. That is not how the Vextari fight. Direct engagement is a matter of honor. What you are describing sounds like trickery. It's not trickery, I say. It's just a different kind of skill. Every drill this week has taught us that strength meets strength, speed meets speed, but nothing says a fight has to be won by matching your opponent's strengths directly. Sometimes the smartest path is the one where you never let them use their strengths against you at all. Niara studies the map for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I brace myself for her to dismiss the idea outright, to remind me that I have no tactical experience, no right to speak in this briefing at all. that everything I just suggested contradicts the values this academy has spent 300 years teaching. Instead, she says quietly, 6 cycles of losses is a long time to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. The room shifts. I can feel it. A subtle change in the air. Cadets who were ready to dismiss my suggestion, now leaning slightly forward, reconsidering. Nyara traces a new path on the map, one that splits our squad exactly the way I described. A loud, visible decoy group moving toward the obvious approach, and a smaller group moving through the dense terrain along the northern ridge. Terrain the third years have likely never needed to defend because no one has ever attacked from that direction. This is a significant risk, Nyara says, more to herself than to the room. If the decoy group is discovered too early, or if the northern route takes longer than expected, we lose both halves of the plan at once. Every plan is a risk, I say. At least this one isn't the same risk they've already learned to defend against. She looks at me for a long moment, something calculating behind her dark eyes, and then she nods, once, decisively. Fine. We try it. Cole, since this is your idea, you move with the northern group. If it fails, I want to understand exactly why it failed, and I want the person who suggested it close enough to explain it to me in person. I don't know if that's meant as a punishment or a strange kind of trust, but I nod anyway, because arguing about it will only waste time we don't have. The exercise begins an hour later, and the forest swallows us the moment we cross the starting line. 6 cadets move with me along the northern ridge, picking through dense undergrowth and uneven ground, moving as quietly as our training allows, which for cadets who have spent years mastering stealth exercises, turns out to be very quiet indeed. Ahead and to the south, I know the decoy group is moving loudly, visibly, exactly the way 6 cycles of losing squads have moved before them, and I can only hope the plan holds together long enough to matter. The terrain along the ridge is brutal, steep in places, thick with roots and low branches that catch at my legs, and more than once I stumble in a way that would have looked embarrassing back on the open training field, but barely registers out here, where everyone is moving carefully regardless of species. A cadet named Ressa, moving just ahead of me, glances back occasionally to make sure I haven't fallen too far behind, and I appreciate the gesture more than I let myself say out loud. 40 minutes into the approach, a comm signal crackles quietly in Ressa's earpiece, relayed from the decoy group. Contact made. Third-year defenses have engaged the decoy squad directly, exactly as predicted, believing they have intercepted the full first-year assault before it could reach the flag position. They've taken the bait, Ressa whispers, relief and disbelief mixing in her voice. We move faster now, still careful, still quiet, but with a new urgency pulling us forward. The northern approach brings us out of the dense forest into a clearing I recognize from the terrain map, close enough to the third-year base that I can see movement through the trees ahead. Defenders clustered near what must be the entrance, their attention fixed entirely on the sounds of engagement coming from the south, exactly where the decoy squad continues its loud, disciplined, thoroughly expected assault. The flag position should be through there, I whisper, pointing toward a gap in the defensive line that no one seems to be watching. If we move now, while their attention is still focused south. Ressa doesn't wait for me to finish the sentence. She signals the rest of the group forward, and we move together through the gap, quick and low, hearts pounding, every instinct screaming that we are about to be discovered at any moment. But the defenders remain focused on the decoy engagement, shouting instructions to each other about a threat that exists exactly where they expect it to exist, never once glancing toward the quiet approach coming from a direction their entire strategy never accounted for. We reach the flag marker standing alone in a small clearing, completely unguarded, and for a moment, none of us quite believe it. Ressa reaches out and lifts the marker from its stand, and the small device chimes softly, registering the capture, sending a signal that will end the exercise within minutes, once it reaches our own base. The runback is faster than the approach, adrenaline replacing caution now that the flag is secured, and by the time we break through the tree line near our own base, the exercise horn is already sounding across the forest, marking the end of the simulation. Cadets from every squad begin emerging from the trees, confused, some of them clearly still engaged in combat exercises they don't yet realize are over, and slowly, the truth spreads through the forest that a first-year squad has captured the flag in less than half the time any squad has managed in 6 cycles. Niara finds me near the base perimeter, her uniform torn slightly from the decoy engagement. A shallow scrape along one arm that the medical staff are already tending to, but her expression is not one of exhaustion or frustration. It is something closer to disbelief, mixed with a reluctant, growing respect. "It worked," she says, as if she still doesn't quite believe the words as she says them. "It worked," I agree. "The third years are furious," she continues, and there is something almost like amusement in her voice now. "They are already arguing that the tactic was dishonorable, that we did not engage them directly, that first years should not be permitted to use, and I am quoting one particularly upset senior cadet, trickery unbecoming of a Vextari warrior. What do you think?" I ask. Niara considers the question seriously, glancing back toward the forest, where the third-year squad is still gathering, still processing their first loss in 6 cycles. "I think," she says slowly, "that 6 cycles of losing the same way should have taught someone, at some point, that honor does not win fights by itself. I think you saw something the rest of us were too disciplined to see, because we were taught not to look for it." Selvara arrives before I can respond, walking across the clearing with the same measured, unhurried steps she used the first day I met her, though her expression now carries something new, an assessment being actively revised in real time. "Cole," she says, stopping in front of me, "I am told the northern approach was your suggestion." "It was a squad effort," I say, glancing at Niara and Ressa, at the rest of the cadets who trusted an untested idea from someone with no tactical training at all. "I just noticed a pattern nobody else was looking at. A pattern that 6 cycles of instructors and senior cadets failed to notice," Selvara says, and I cannot tell yet whether that observation pleases her or troubles her. "Do you understand what you have done here, Cole? You have introduced an idea into this academy that contradicts 300 years of doctrine. Some of my instructors are already calling for your removal, insisting that this kind of thinking corrupts the values we are meant to instill in every cadet who trains here." "And what do you think?" I ask, echoing the same question Niara asked me a moment ago. Selvara is quiet for a long moment, studying me with those storm-colored eyes, weighing something I cannot quite see the shape of yet. "I think," she says finally, "that a warrior who can only win one way is not truly prepared for every fight she will face. I also think that this academy has grown comfortable in its traditions, and comfort is not the same thing as strength." She turns to look at the forest, where the third-year squad continues arguing among themselves, still processing the shock of their first loss in 6 years, still trying to decide whether what happened today was a clever tactic or a betrayal of everything they believe a fight should be. "I have not decided what to do with you yet, Cole," Selvara says, turning back to me. "You may be exactly what this academy needs to grow beyond its own limitations, or you may be a contaminant that undermines everything it stands for. I suspect the difference will become clear soon enough." She walks away without waiting for a response, leaving me standing in the clearing with Niara and Ressa and the rest of the squad, who trusted an idea that shouldn't have worked, but did. Niara watches Selvara disappear, back toward the main academy building, then turns to look at me, with an expression I haven't seen from her before, something that isn't quite friendship yet, but isn't the cold dismissal of our first conversation either. "For what it is worth," she says, "I was wrong about you. Not entirely wrong. You are still slow, and you still fall over far too often during combat drills, but I was wrong to think you had nothing to offer this squad." "I'll take that as a compliment," I say. "Take it as an observation," she says, echoing Talia's words from days earlier, and for the first time since I arrived at this academy, I catch the faint suggestion of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Do not let it become a habit, expecting compliments from me. That night, lying in my narrow cot, with the sounds of the forest still fresh in my memory, I think about Selvara's words, about the line she drew between what I might become and what I might destroy. I do not know yet which side of that line I will end up on. I do not know that within days, that same uncertainty will make me a target for cadets and instructors who see today's victory not as growth, but as a threat to everything they believe this academy is meant to protect. For tonight, though, exhausted in a way that feels different from the exhaustion of my first days here, less like defeat and more like the ache of something earned, I allow myself a small, quiet satisfaction. For the first time since that gate sealed shut behind me, I do not feel like a diplomat, trapped inside a soldier's world. I feel, for just a moment, like I might actually belong here. The feeling does not last as long as I want it to. 3 days after the forest exercise, a notice appears on the training board, announcing a live fire trial for all first-year squads, and something about the way the notice is worded makes Talia go quiet the moment she reads it. "This is early," she says, frowning at the board. "Live fire trials are usually scheduled for the final month of the cycle, not 3 weeks into training, and they are never announced with less than a week's notice." "Maybe they want to see how the squad performs after the forest exercise," I say, trying to sound more confident than I feel. "Maybe," Talia says, though her tone suggests she doesn't entirely believe it. The trial takes place in a sectioned area of the Eastern Range, a controlled course of moving targets, timed obstacles, and defensive positions cadets are meant to navigate using training weapons, calibrated to a low-intensity setting, enough to register a hit without causing genuine harm. I have used these weapons twice before during standard drills, and both times the equipment functioned exactly as expected, a brief stinging sensation on impact, and an automatic safety shutdown built into every unit as a precaution. Our squad gathers at the starting position, as the morning mist begins to clear, and I notice Niara scanning the range with more intensity than usual, her eyes moving across the equipment racks, the safety barriers, the instructors positioned at the monitoring stations along the perimeter. "Something feels wrong," she says quietly, close enough that only I can hear her. "Wrong how?" "I do not know yet," she admits, "but I have run this range a dozen times, and something about today feels different. The instructor positions are wrong. Usually there are 6 monitoring the course. Today I count 4. Before I can ask what that might mean, the trial begins, and our squad moves into the course in staggered formation, exactly as we practiced during the briefing. The first section passes without incident, moving targets rising and falling on schedule, cadets responding with the same precise, disciplined movement I have watched them perfect over the past 3 weeks. I move through my own section more carefully than confidently, still slower than everyone around me, but steady enough to keep pace with the group. It happens during the 3rd section of the course, in a narrow corridor built from stacked barriers, meant to simulate close-quarters navigation. I am moving through the corridor when the safety lighting along the walls flickers once, then goes dark entirely, and somewhere ahead of me, a targeting system that should have deactivated on schedule, instead activates at full intensity, well beyond the calibrated training setting. Niara shouts a warning a half-second before the malfunctioning system fires, and the shot that should have been a harmless training sting instead strikes the barrier beside my head with enough force to send fragments of shattered plating scattering across the corridor floor. I drop instinctively, the way 3 weeks of combat drills have taught my body to react even when my mind is still catching up to what just happened, and the next shot passes through the space where I was standing a moment earlier. "Down, stay down," Niara shouts, already moving toward me through the narrow corridor, disregarding the exercise protocol entirely, disregarding the fact that breaking formation during a live trial could cost her significant standing with the instructors watching from the perimeter. The malfunctioning system fires twice more before an alarm finally sounds across the range, and the entire course shuts down at once, safety lighting flooding back on, emergency barriers rising from the ground to seal off the affected section. Niara reaches me just as the lockdown completes, pulling me upright, checking me for injury with quick, efficient hands, before I even have the chance to process what almost happened. "I'm fine," I say, though my voice comes out rougher than I intend, adrenaline still flooding through my body. "I'm fine, it missed." "It should not have fired at all," Niara says, and there is something dangerous in her voice now, something that has nothing to do with relief, and everything to do with anger. "That system was calibrated for a moving target sequence that ended 3 minutes before you entered that corridor. It should have been completely inactive. Instructors converge on the section quickly, and within the hour, the entire training ground has been cleared while a technical team investigates the malfunction. I sit on a low wall near the perimeter, still processing the strange, hollow feeling of having nearly been seriously injured by equipment that was supposed to be nothing more than a training tool, while Selvara arrives to personally oversee the investigation. The findings come back late that afternoon, and Selvara delivers them to our squad directly, her expression carved from something colder than I have seen from her before. The targeting system in Section 3 was deliberately recalibrated, she says. Someone accessed the equipment settings this morning, before the trial began, and adjusted the intensity levels well beyond safe parameters. This was not a malfunction. This was sabotage. The word settles over the squad like a physical weight. Niara's jaw tightens, and several other cadets exchange glances I can't quite interpret, somewhere between shock and a grim kind of confirmation, as if part of them expected something like this eventually. Sabotage against whom? I ask, though I already suspect I know the answer. Against you specifically, Selvara says. The recalibration was set to activate only within the section of the course assigned to your position in the formation. No other cadet was ever at risk. This was targeted, deliberate, and intended to remove you from this academy, by whatever means necessary, including means that would have caused you serious harm. The investigation continues over the following days, and slowly, quietly, a picture begins to form. A faction within the academy, instructors and senior cadets who never accepted my presence here, who saw the forest exercise not as a demonstration of tactical creativity, but as proof that my presence was corrupting 300 years of Vextari tradition. They believed, apparently with genuine conviction, that removing me permanently, through injury serious enough to force a medical withdrawal, would be a service to the academy, rather than a crime against it. Selvara does not tell me who specifically is responsible, not yet, insisting the investigation must run its proper course before any accusations become official. But the tension in the academy shifts noticeably in the days that follow, instructors watching me with expressions that range from guilty avoidance to open, unapologetic hostility, as if the sabotage attempt, now exposed, has only confirmed their belief that I never should have been permitted to stay in the first place. I find myself in Selvara's office 3 days after the incident, summoned for what she describes only as an important conversation. When I arrive, she is standing near the window, looking out over the training field, where cadets move through their evening drills, unaware of the conversation happening above them. I have identified the individuals responsible, she says, without turning around. 2 instructors and a senior cadet, all members of a faction that has grown increasingly vocal since your arrival. They believe your presence here threatens something essential about what this academy represents. What happens to them now? I ask. That depends, Selvara says, finally turning to face me, on what you choose to do next. I frown, not immediately understanding what she means. What do you mean, what I choose to do? Isn't this a matter for the academy to handle, according to whatever laws and traditions govern situations like this? It is, she says, but there is a provision within our traditions that applies specifically to situations involving direct harm between cadets or staff. The injured party, in this case, you, has the right to demand a formal confrontation, an opportunity to respond to the harm done against you, in a manner our traditions consider appropriate. Meaning what exactly? Selvara's expression is carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Meaning you would be permitted to challenge the responsible individuals directly, in a controlled setting, and respond to their actions in whatever manner our customs allow for such grievances. Many cadets in your position would demand exactly that. It is, by our traditions, considered a reasonable and even expected response to deliberate harm. I think about this for a long moment, about what it would mean to stand in front of the instructors and the senior cadet who tried to have me seriously hurt, to answer their sabotage with whatever confrontation the Academy's customs would consider fair. Some part of me, the part still shaking slightly whenever I remember the sound of that shattering barrier beside my head, wants exactly that, wants them to understand, clearly and unmistakably, that what they did was not survivable without consequence. But I think too, about every assumption humanity has fought against since first contact, about the careful, patient work of proving that we belong at tables other species have never invited us to before, about how easily a single moment of retaliation, however justified it might feel, could confirm every fear the Vextari have ever harbored about human volatility, about a species too quick to answer harm with harm. What happens if I don't demand the confrontation? I ask. Selvara studies me carefully, something shifting behind her storm-colored eyes. Then the matter proceeds through standard disciplinary channels. The responsible parties would face consequences, determined by the Academy's leadership rather than by you directly. It would be, by our traditions, seen as an unusual choice. Some would call it weakness. And you? What would you call it? She is quiet for a long moment before answering. I would call it a decision I did not expect a human diplomat to make, given everything I have read about your species' history. I would call it, perhaps, the beginning of an answer to a question I have been asking myself since the day you walked through that gate. What question is that? Whether a human can hold power without immediately reaching for it, she says simply. I think about my grandfather again, about all those quiet lessons delivered without much explanation, lessons I only understood the full weight of years later. I think about Niara pulling me upright in that corridor, disregarding every protocol that might have protected her own standing, because in that moment, protecting me mattered more to her than the rules. I think about what kind of academy, what kind of relationship between our two species might grow from this moment, depending entirely on what I choose to do with it. I don't want the confrontation, I say finally. I want them to face whatever consequences the Academy's leadership decides are appropriate. But I want it done fairly, and I want it understood clearly that this was never about proving anything through force. It was about someone trying to remove me because they were afraid of what I represented, and I'm not interested in answering fear with more fear. Selvara is silent for a long moment, studying me with an expression I still cannot fully read, though something in it has shifted, softened almost imperceptibly since I walked into this office. That is not the choice most cadets would make, she says finally. Maybe not, I say. But it's the choice I'm making. The consequences that follow are significant. The two instructors are removed from their positions entirely, their access to the academy revoked. The senior cadet responsible faces disciplinary proceedings that will likely end her career here before it truly begins. But there is no confrontation, no moment where the academy watches me answer sabotage with force, and something about that restraint moves through the training ground in the days that follow like a quiet, unexpected current. Cadets and instructors alike, reassessing something they thought they understood clearly. Niara finds me that evening near the training field, watching the sunset settle over the stone walls that once felt like a prison and now feel, slowly and strangely, like something closer to home. I heard what you chose, she says, sitting down beside me without waiting for an invitation. Word travels fast around here. It is a small academy, in some ways, she says. Everyone is already talking about it. Some think you made a foolish choice. Some think you missed an opportunity to prove yourself, using terms this academy would have respected. What do you think? She is quiet for a moment, watching the last light fade behind the western wall. I think, she says finally, that you proved yourself using terms this academy did not know how to measure yet. I think that might matter more, in the end, than anything you could have proven with a confrontation. We sit together in silence for a while after that, the training field empty and quiet in the evening light, and I think about how close I came to losing everything 3 days ago, and how the choice I made in the aftermath might matter, in some quiet, lasting way, more than any single trial or exercise I have completed since arriving here. The road ahead is not finished. There is still training to complete, still trust to earn, still a graduation waiting somewhere, at the end of this cycle, that I am not yet certain I will reach. But for tonight, sitting beside a cadet who once wanted nothing to do with me, watching the same sunset settle over stone walls that have slowly, gradually, become less like a fortress and more like a place I might actually belong, I let myself believe, just for a moment, that the hardest part might finally be behind me. I am wrong about that too, though not in the way I expect. The final trial arrives without warning, the way Selvara always intended it to, and I am pulled from a routine morning drill by a summons that tells me nothing except that I am to report to the Eastern Range immediately, alone. I walk the long path to the range with a strange, settled calm I would not have believed myself capable of during my first week here, when every unfamiliar summons felt like the beginning of another disaster. So much has changed since that first morning in the courtyard, the papers scattered at my feet, the gate sealing shut behind me, with a sound I still sometimes hear in quiet moments before sleep. Selvara waits for me at the range entrance, and beside her stands the full instructor panel, along with a face I recognize but have not spoken with much since the forest exercise weeks ago, a senior officer from the Vextari High Command, someone whose presence here clearly signals that today is not a routine trial. Cole, Selvara says, You have completed every formal requirement of this training cycle. Physical trials, tactical exercises, the sabotage investigation, and its aftermath. All of it. What remains is a final assessment, conducted before this panel, examining not your body or your reflexes, but everything you have demonstrated about what kind of soldier, and what kind of representative of your species, you intend to be. What does that involve exactly? I ask. Questions, Selvara says. Honest ones. And an honest accounting from you in return. The senior officer, whose name I learn is Commander Vesa, steps forward, studying me with an expression that carries none of the warmth Selvara has slowly developed toward me over these weeks, and none of the open hostility I faced from the faction responsible for the sabotage either. Just careful, professional assessment. You entered this academy by accident, Commander Vesa says. A treaty technicality, nothing more. You had every reasonable justification to leave the moment that gate sealed behind you, and every reasonable justification to leave again after the sabotage attempt against you 3 weeks ago. Instead, you remained, and you completed a training cycle designed specifically for Vextari soldiers, without the physical advantages our own cadets possess. Tell me honestly, Cole, why did you stay? I think about the question for a long moment before answering, aware that whatever I say here will likely shape how this academy, and perhaps how the wider Vextari military, thinks about humanity for years to come. At first, I say slowly, I stayed because I didn't want to be the diplomat who ran from an open door. That's the honest answer, even if it isn't a particularly noble one. Pride kept me here during that first night, when everything in me wanted to wait by the gate until morning. And after that first night? Commander Vesa asks. After that, I say, I started to understand something I don't think I fully appreciated before I arrived. I came here believing I was supposed to observe your culture from a careful, respectful distance, take notes, write reports, build a relationship between our species through documents and formal meetings. But documents don't teach you what it actually feels like to fail at something, over and over, in front of people who expect you to fail. Reports don't teach you what it means when someone who has every reason to dismiss you chooses instead to trust an idea you're not even confident in yourself. I glance toward the training field, where I can just make out the shapes of cadets moving through their morning drills in the distance, Niara's squad among them. I stayed, I continue, because somewhere in these past weeks, this stopped being an assignment I was completing and started being something I actually cared about finishing well. Not because I need to prove humans belong here, though I hope in some small way I have helped with that, but because the people I have trained beside deserve someone who stayed for the right reasons, not just the ones that looked good in a report. Commander Vesa is quiet for a long moment, exchanging a glance with Selvara that I cannot fully interpret. Then she asks a second question, one that feels somehow more important than the first. The sabotage against you 3 weeks ago could have ended your life, she says. You chose not to demand the confrontation our traditions permit. Many would call that choice a weakness, an unwillingness to answer harm appropriately. Explain to me why you consider it otherwise. I don't think strength and restraint are opposites, I say. I think that's actually the mistake at the center of a lot of what almost went wrong here. The instructors and the cadet responsible for the sabotage believed my presence threatened something essential about this academy, that Vextari traditions couldn't survive contact with a different way of thinking, a different way of fighting. If I had answered their fear with force, even force your traditions would have considered fair. I would have proven them right. I would have shown that humans really do answer everything with aggression, that we can't be trusted inside spaces like this one. And if restraint had been seen as weakness instead? Commander Vesa asks, if your choice had cost you the respect of this academy rather than earning it, then it still would have been the right choice, I say. I didn't choose restraint because I calculated it would earn me anything. I chose it because it was consistent with why I stayed here in the first place. If I only hold on to my values when they're convenient, they were never really values at all. The panel is quiet for a long time after that, instructors exchanging glances, Selvara watching me with an expression I have slowly learned to recognize over these past weeks, something that might, in a Vextari way, be called approval. Commander Vesa finally speaks again, her voice carrying a different weight now, less like an interrogation, and more like a genuine conclusion being reached. There has been considerable debate within the High Command about what to do with your presence here, Cole, regardless of how this final assessment concluded. Some believed your admission, however accidental, should be quietly reversed, treated as an administrative error, corrected as discreetly as possible. Others believed your presence here, and your performance, represents something the Vextari military should study more carefully. And what do you believe? I ask. I believe, Commander Vesa says, that 300 years of tradition taught this academy to measure strength in very narrow terms: speed, reflex, physical power, direct, honorable engagement. You possessed almost none of those qualities when you arrived here, and yet you completed this training cycle, contributed a tactical innovation that ended a 6-cycle losing streak, and responded to a genuine attempt on your safety with a choice that required more discipline than any physical trial we have ever designed. I believe this academy has learned something valuable from your presence, whether it intended to or not. Selvara steps forward then, and for the first time since I arrived at this academy, I see something in her expression that looks almost like warmth, carefully guarded but unmistakably present. Graduation proceeds this evening, she says. You will stand in formation with the rest of your cycle, Cole, recognized as a full graduate of this academy, the first of your species, and I suspect, given how this cycle has unfolded, not the last. The evening arrives faster than I expect, the training field transformed by the time the ceremony begins, banners raised along the stone walls, the entire academy gathered in careful formation, beneath a sky just beginning to darken into evening. I stand in my place among the graduating cadets, wearing a uniform that fits differently now than it did during those first exhausting weeks, my body having slowly adjusted, if never fully matched, to the demands this place made of it. Niara stands beside me in formation, and Talia stands just beyond her, and Ressa, who trusted an untested tactic in a forest weeks ago, stands further down the line, all of us cadets who began this cycle as strangers, and ended as something considerably more complicated to name. Selvara addresses the formation as the last light fades from the sky, her voice carrying easily across the silent field, the way it did on that first morning, when she introduced me as the human who had chosen to remain. This academy has trained soldiers for 300 years, she says, and for 300 years, it trained them according to a single understanding of what strength requires. This cycle challenged that understanding, in ways I did not anticipate when it began, and I suspect in ways this academy will continue examining for cycles to come. She pauses, her eyes moving across the formation, before settling briefly on me. We learned, this cycle, that strength is not only measured in speed or power, but sometimes in the discipline to choose restraint, when every tradition tells you force would be justified. We learned that 6 cycles of losing a war games exercised the same way does not mean there is only one way to win it. We learned, perhaps most importantly, that welcoming someone different into a space built entirely around a single kind of excellence does not weaken that space. It reveals excellence this academy did not yet know how to recognize. Her gaze settles fully on me now, and I feel every cadet in the formation feel the weight of that attention shift toward me as well. Ethan Cole entered this academy by accident, bound by a treaty clause none of us anticipated. Selvara continues. He leaves it tonight as something this academy has never produced before, and something I believe it will be stronger for having produced. Not because he became more like the cadets who trained beside him, because he remained, in every meaningful way, exactly who he was, and this academy learned to see the value in that difference, rather than simply tolerating it. The formation erupts into the traditional closing call, a sound I have heard many times during my weeks here, but never directed at me until now. Hundreds of voices rising together across the darkening field, and I find myself standing very still, trying to hold on to the full weight of this moment before it passes. After the ceremony formally concludes, Niara finds me near the edge of the field, the two of us watching the last of the graduating class disperse into the evening, quiet conversations and quiet laughter, carrying across the stone courtyard that once felt so cold and unfamiliar. I called you a liability, she says, without any preamble, the way she tends to say most things. During our first real conversation, I told you that you would get someone hurt, or get yourself hurt, and that leaving was the only reasonable choice available to you. I remember. I want to say clearly that I was wrong, she says. Not simply mistaken about your physical capabilities, though I was certainly wrong about those as well. I was wrong about something larger. I assumed strength could only look one way, because that was the only way I had ever seen it. You taught this entire academy, myself included, that assumption was smaller than the truth. You gave me a chance to prove that, I say. You didn't have to trust the northern approach in the forest. You didn't have to pull me out of that corridor during the sabotage, without worrying about your own standing. I couldn't have gotten here without people willing to take a risk on someone who didn't fit the pattern they expected. She considers this for a moment, then extends her hand, a gesture I recognize now as significant among the Vextari, reserved for moments that carry real weight rather than casual courtesy. Shieldmate, she says, using a word I have heard exchanged between trusted cadets throughout this cycle, but never once directed at me until this moment. I take her hand. Shieldmate, I answer. Later that night, standing alone, near the same courtyard where this entire journey began, I think about the version of myself who walked through that gate weeks ago, expecting a comfortable diplomatic assignment, a careful distance from anything that might actually challenge him. That version of me could not have imagined standing here now, graduated from an academy that trains soldiers for a species not his own, carrying a title, Shieldmate, that means more to me than any diplomatic credential I arrived with. I think about the report I will eventually need to write for my government, and how differently it will read than the report I imagined drafting during that first frightened night in my narrow quarters. I think about what this means, not just for me, but for whatever comes next between our two species, for whatever future diplomats or soldiers or simple curious travelers follow the path I accidentally opened when I misread a treaty clause and walked through the wrong gate at the wrong time. I do not know yet what my life looks like from here forward. I do not know if I will return to diplomatic work, carrying what I learned here into rooms filled with careful negotiations and formal agreements, or if some part of what I found in this academy, the discipline, the hard-won respect, the strange, unexpected sense of belonging among cadets who once wanted nothing to do with me, will pull me toward a different path entirely. What I do know, standing in this courtyard beneath a sky full of unfamiliar stars, is that I did not run. Whatever else this cycle taught me, whatever else changed in the weeks since that gate sealed shut behind a diplomat who never meant to become anything more than an observer, I stayed, and I finished what I started, and somewhere in that stubborn refusal to walk away, I found something I did not know I was looking for. Somewhere behind me, footsteps approach, unhurried and familiar, and I already know, without turning around, that it is Selvara, come to see the courtyard one more time, before the academy settles into its usual quiet. You are still standing here, she observes, coming to stand beside me. Most graduates celebrate, you reflect. Old habit, I say. Diplomats are trained to think before they act. I suppose some habits survive even a training cycle like this one. A useful habit, she says, even for a soldier, perhaps especially for a soldier. We stand together in comfortable silence for a while, looking out over the training field where this entire story began, where a frightened diplomat once faced a choice between an easy exit and an uncertain path forward. What happens now? I ask eventually. Now, Selvara says, you carry what you learned here into whatever comes next, exactly as every graduate before you has done, and this academy carries what it learned from you into every cycle that follows, whether it fully understands the weight of that lesson yet or not. I think that sounds like a fair trade, one built not on a single dramatic victory, but on the accumulated weight of small choices, made again and again. To stay when leaving would have been easier, to answer harm with restraint rather than force, to trust unfamiliar ideas even when 300 years of tradition suggested otherwise. I look out over the quiet field one last time, at the stone walls that once felt like a prison and now feel, unmistakably, like something closer to home, and I understand, finally, why I never truly considered walking away, not on that first frightened night, and not on any of the difficult nights that followed. Some doors, once you walk through them, change you too completely to ever walk back out the same person who entered. I did not choose that transformation when I stepped through the academy gate weeks ago, but I chose, every single day since, to let it happen anyway. And whatever comes next, for me, for this academy, for whatever future now exists between our two very different worlds, I would make that same choice again, without hesitation, every single time.